Some maps in StarCraft 2 are very interesting and have a plethora of unique features on them that make the games more interesting than normal. Lost Temple is one of those maps, and this is the map that we are going to be playing on today is Lost Temple. This game is going to be between me down here in the bottom left, Savagewood, and my buddy and clanmate A-Ramp. We play 2v2 together, and we always play a warm-up 1v1 before we play a 2v2 ladder game, just so we can sort of get warm, because if you haven't played StarCraft in a few days, playing the first game and getting that out of the way, the first game jitters, is really important. So whenever I play team games with my buddies, I think it's really important to play a warm-up game, because playing a warm-up game not only allows you to get those jitters out and have that one game where your macro balloons a few times, and not have that happen on the ladder and happen in a friendly game where it doesn't really affect anyone, but playing a 1v1 with someone that you're able to talk to afterwards, who wants to help you get better and try to talk to you and say, well, you did this and it was really annoying, so you should keep doing that in the future because it's something that is kind of hard to play against, versus, oh, well, look here, you made this mistake with your macro and that's why you lost, or with this build you have to sort of try to defend it this way. Savagewood is going for a factory here after barracks. Notice he's quick walled in here and has not put an expansion down. It looks like he's going to run an SCV out. This might be for an expansion. But whenever you quick wall in, a lot of times this is indicative of a player who wants to hide tech. Tech, of course, just means technology if you're new to the game. Savagewood is electing to expand here. This is a safe variation, an expansion in base. Oftentimes we see this if players want to do something that is very focused on pushing forward and not having a lot of units at home, or maybe they don't want to go for Reaper, or they're worried that the player they're playing against is going to cheese them. A-Ramp, however, has gone for a fast expansion, and he's transferred a lot of drones down here. Now, one of the reasons that Lost Temple is sort of noticeable and noteworthy, and you say, wow, that's a peculiar feature, is this right here. This is a high ground that you can drop units on, looking right above the natural expansion. So if you're brand new to StarCraft, you have the main base. This is just the one that everyone starts with. And then you have your ramp that leads down to your natural, which is, you know, the base that you want to take, your very first expansion. Now, the fact that there's a high ground right above your expansion, and you see there's no ramp that leads up to this, it's like a little island or a little cliff, this makes it a very popular target for drops. Now, the reason that I'm showcasing this game on Lost Temple isn't just because, oh, it's a weird map I found in StarCraft. No, this was a map that was used in the professional scene, in the highest tournament, the GSL, and quite frankly, all other tournaments. And something to be considered is it was used right at the beginning of StarCraft, right in 2010, 2011, that period. But it was evidently, or not evidently, excuse me, it was eventually altered for a little modified version called Shattered Temple. This is Lost Temple, where this high ground was removed and rocks ended up going to this third, and this third, which was an island in Lost Temple, and is an island in the case of this game that we're watching right here. But steps, and by steps I mean this little backdoor path got established with rocks on Shattered Temple. Now, Steps of War was a very prevalent map in the early days of StarCraft 2. As a Marine comes out here and he's scouting around, he saw this Overlord. He's trying to find where A-Ramp spawns, and if we go to Savagewood Vision, he doesn't really know. He knows that it's not close by ground. That's one thing noteworthy with maps in early StarCraft 2 is you could actually spawn in this position versus the position Savagewood is in right now. It's called close by ground position, and it's very, very hard to deal with the Zerg, because if we look, the natural rush distance is about one screen over, and you're right in Zerg's face. It's very common on this map to go for a tech-based drop on this cliff, because you know Zerg is going to have to fast expand. The third base has rocks on it, this third is an island, and then this one, of course, has another cliff. So, interestingly enough, in Legacy of the Void, you can get drop overlords after an evolution chamber. So we'll see if A-Ramp Goes for that. We see a Thorship is on the way here, and Savagewood is starting to get his economy. A ramp is checking the third base, it's not there, but Savagewood has a tank, and of course he does have a wall in, and the Thor is going to start to go to work at the spine. A ramp does have a Overlord dropping creep, and this isn't a man or mule, folks. This is Savagewood saying, okay, I need to repair, and the Thor takes up all 8 slots of a medevac. Queens are very, very vulnerable to Thors. This is something that you don't really know if you haven't played Lost Temple is, wow, a Queen actually dies insanely quickly to a Thor drop. Because obviously players usually go for something like Marine Marauder drops. As A-Ramp has taken this other base very quickly and transfers some of his workers. And Savage is going to drop the Thor on the low ground, and there the Queen goes. It's three hits, so boom, 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 and the Queen is gone. Savagewood, of course, does have the ability to drop on this high ground if a lot of lings come over. And the Queen is very low, so let's look at what it is for A-Ramp. Now, because this Overlord died that was spreading creep on this high ground, A-Ramp wasn't even able to shoot the Thor when it gets on the high ground. Savagewood is going to pick up and run back with the Thor. Back in Camp Savagewood, he's making a third. He's going into some light bio. He started double upgrades, but going for an early Thor is something you commit a lot to, as you see 2 static defense structures being taken down there, 1 cancelled, and Savagewood is going to come up here and mow another one down. And remember, you use the drone to make that, and if you don't cancel it, you lose the money, so that actually is a big deal. And another big deal about being heavily harassed is sometimes your macro can go out of control. Another thing about this extended harassment in particular, it affects your production and your mining and an inject. So this is more than just, oh, someone's dropping me with Marines, because this has consistently affected A-Ramp's larva, mining, and really even ability to produce out of this, because a lot of times anytime you make something with these larvae when it hatches, it's under peril. So finally we see A-Ramp, he's made a dropper lord, he's repositioned some static defense. And in his main, he has Roach Tech with double upgrades. Savagewood picks up the Thorship, and A-Ramp actually very nicely did some burrow micro onto that Roach. Not that it mattered, he had the critical mass to run the Thor off, but he didn't lose it. And Savagewood is going to clear creep here. You always want to do this in TVZ. This is textbook TVZ. It's just picking off tumors. Usually it's with Hellions or Marines. In this case, it's a Thorship. But anytime you have a medevac, you can very easily pick off tumors. Another interesting feature beside this high ground cliff is this is a cliff overlooking this little Zelnaga tower, and there are 2 of them, and then this is actually a little cliff, a little series of tiny little cliffs. You can put Templars up here, although it's extraordinarily rare. Most people don't even really use these. And it's interesting to note that back in Wings of Liberty, as Savagewood is going to try to drop his Thor and kill Overlords, but A-Ramp's ready for it, and he bursts the Thor down. So that's what happens if you drop somewhere and you look away for a second and the person knows where the drop is. They can DPS it down. And Savagewood suddenly has lost that very annoying Thor drop that probably had upwards of 20 kills. A-Ramp has 2-2 on the way, so does Savagewood. Savagewood, of course, is getting ground armor attack. A-Ramp has taken this base and this base. Another reason why Lost Temple is interesting, you know, you have the gold base with rocks that oddly enough is kind of under peril by the cliff too, so if you're Protoss or Terran and you're trying to say, oh well, why doesn't Zerg do this or this, it seems like there's some answers, but in reality with the cliff looking over this base and this being an island, as you see Savagewood has flown off and mulehammered this island. A-Ramp was trying to do some burrow play, but even burrowed roaches can't squeeze in through hard wall-ins. Earlier, A-Ramp didn't have the burrow tech, so Savagewood didn't see the little spines on their back. These little spines mean that they have burrow movement. So Savagewood hasn't built the turrets. He is ferrying workers over here to the base. And an interesting component of island bases is oftentimes they just neglected to get scouted, and if your opponent doesn't know that you have a third in StarCraft, it can completely change the way that they want to play and act. So Savagewood lowers his ramp, his front door ramp, whatever you want to call that, front door, and then raises it back up. A-Ramp is trying to flood out drones to his base here. He's also going Nidus and Infestation Pit. And as soon as he gets Infestation Pit, I'm sure he will aim to tech to Hive. Now this is the tricky thing about Lost Temple. Usually your fourth is going to be one of these bases on a map, position-wise, but the fact that there's rocks and the fact that it's an island can really foul people up. Double drop on the way here for Savagewood. His combat shield is about to finish. Another base has started as we see his third base. And A-Ramp is actually doing a roach drop in the main, so some light roach harassment is going to go after the upgrades. And I think this might be a classic diversion maneuver, as in StarCraft. One of the best things you can do is drop somewhere, and of course Savagewood runs forward, and as soon as he runs his Marines over, A-Ramp tries to run in, but the problem is there were mech units left here for Savagewood. He is going multiple factory mech. A-Ramp burrows his roaches, and Savagewood is going to try to mow down the roaches in the back and the front, and he succeeds. Meanwhile, there is a drop in the main of A-Ramp, and some creep did get cleared out with the scan. Roach Warren goes down, so A-Ramp is in this position where he can't make roaches anymore. He did get a big swell in before it died, and he's already remaking the Warren, but these Gem Rainers are eating away at the main, and Savagewood, most importantly, sees this Nidus, and he's going to pressure but get held off by the static defense. But A-Ramp squeezed a ton of mutas out, as A-Ramp has a pretty decent economy. Meanwhile, Savagewood is dropping up. He was on this cliff, that's why that gas is dead. And suddenly A-Ramp is harassing with mutas, but when you're being dropped in multiple locations, oftentimes it's very easy to miss micro mutas. And when your mutas get spread out like this, they can get picked off more easily. Savagewood's making mass turrets, making turrets out at his third, so Savagewood isn't dead. And the Overseers are extending a little bit. Now this is what happens if you A-move out here, and Overseers, of course, can't actually attack stuff, and A-Ramp, trying to defend this base, ends up losing it, and losing a lot of Overseers. Suddenly he only can make about 10 supply, and he has a lot of money. Now Savagewood did save a few of those Marines. He's starting to drop, and look at this. Mutas are being pulled back to deal with the drop. So that was a ton of action. Let's just take stock of what happened. So the Natural got pressured, but the attack was held. The Roach Warren died. The Queen died. The Hive is very low. And Mutalists are back in the main, but let's look at A-Ramp's vision. He's macroing, and what happens when you macro and don't look at your mutas? That happens. And suddenly the muta count is about cut in half. A-Ramp going back and forth. It's like a chicken fight. Savagewood saying, okay, pulls out a 12 gauge during the chicken fight, and look at this. Savagewood's trying to be cute with his micro, and he stims and focus fires the mutas and flees with the medevac, and suddenly in the unit tab, it is a blank slate mutal-wise. A-Ramp still hasn't killed these rocks. Now, abnormal maps, in terms of features like that, can be hard to deal with your macro if you're really focused on harassing with burrowed roaches. And it looks like A-Ramp is doing just that, harassing with burrowed roaches. As Savagewood was trying to run out to clear his own rocks, and without any supporting units, Savagewood's Thors are decimated here. Nice pickoffs there from A-Ramp, but it does cost him something. When you're, oh, a Nidus out here, and Savagewood desperately trying to gun that down, and he does, as he really, really didn't want anything to pour out of that Nidus. Savagewood has had tanks up in his Natural defending, sometimes on this high ground as well, and that is huge. That and this wall-in has really prevented A-Ramp's cutesy burrow tactics from ruining the game for the Terran player. The island base has not been taken. It's very peculiar for a Zerg player to say, okay, I think I'm going to take my island now if they're not used to it. It's much more difficult because Terran, if they make their third at their Natural and then about the same distance, it's okay, a rocked base or an island that is all the way on the other side of the map from my opponent favors the Terran a little bit. Same goes for high grounds. The Zerg's not going to be able to do a lot of strategies where he can abuse high grounds. The Zerg's not going to be able to say, like, even in Legacy of the Void where drop is actually a viable option. Of course, it wasn't in Wings of Liberty. You had to have layer and it was 200-200. And we see these rocks are being cleaned out. With this hatch already up for A-Ramp, he might just long distance mine. It's hard to say. A lot of people will elect to make another hatch here. The fact that he has so much money means that he probably should make another hatch. But this one is about to finish. And of course he did lose his main, or he didn't lose his main, excuse me. It was under duress. He lost the Creep Queen in his main. and he lost this base is what I was thinking of. So it is easier for your macro to balloon a little bit when you lose bases. And A Ramp is trying to go for an Infestor play here, it looks like. Now there is no supporting cast here, and he might just try to do this with pure Infestors. If we look at his vision, it kind of looks like, oh, that might be a good idea. He doesn't really know. Savage Wood has a ton of stuff out here, and it dies. Savage Wood was right next to that. And if we look in Camp Savage Wood, he has multiple factories. He's getting the medevac speed upgrade and a Raven because he knows A Ramp has been doing extended burrow plays the whole time. So Savage Wood, having seen the burrowed stuff at his front door in the early game, along with the drop, and seeing the Nidus stuff, he knows A Ramp is being sneaky. A Ramp does actually have these bases alive and kicking. But now A Ramp is trying to do those burrowed plays. And do we have a Raven in the house, ladies and gents? I mean, we have a turret out here. And suddenly, A Ramp, oh, the scan goes down, and this is so bad for A Ramp. He was trying to get too cute. He's going to do some going away fungals. But when you do the same tactics over and over as far as burrow goes, a good Terran player is going to start making detection and getting onto you. Now, A Ramp had a ton of Infestors, and suddenly that Infestor count is trimmed. He has a few burrowed roaches hidden, but he really needs a big swell of units. A lot of damage onto these units for Savage Wood with only 2 medevacs, but he's going to try to press forward here is Savage Wood. And A Ramp has been throwing fungals out. That's why this stuff is so weak. A turret gets thrown out, and Savage Wood just doesn't have a lot of bio here because of all the fungals. And the Raven is out, preventing the burrowed roaches from getting devastating damage. Another fungal goes out. The tanks are spread adequately, but Savage Wood's stuff was so bruised that the roach combo was actually able to clean it up. Now A Ramp lost an extraordinary amount of Infestors, but you have to consider Savage Wood had a big army, and this is another feature that's good for Terran that you didn't actually see in Wings of Liberty, is I was so excited about the obnoxiousness of the Liberator Circle being able to cover entire choke points. Savage Wood very bravely fighting off these roaches, but this is one of those oh shit moments where you're expecting pure roach and get hit with ultras. Now if you look at A Ramp's upgrades, this is one of those weird situations where you were going ranged upgrades and suddenly you feel like ultras are the best option, so you don't have melee upgrades to transition into. This makes things a lot easier for Savage Wood, whose 3-3 is about to finish, and the natural for Savage Wood is under duress, and the Liberator is still being obnoxious for Savage Wood. And ultras are scary, but unsupported they're not very good. You really need a lot of lings to help support ultras, and the Infestors of course were picked off. They tried to go up the ramp, and kiting is being executed here for Savage Wood. Tanks on the high ground. A Ramp loses all of his ultras. He's going to flood over here with lings, but the lings are a day late and $1 short. Savage Wood will be forced to lift that base. The third base still unknown for A Ramp, and that's rough because if you consider A Ramp's been playing this game thinking that Savage Wood is on one less base than he's been on, which in many instances has led A Ramp to believe that he's even or ahead, considering how quick this expo was. Also consider Savage Wood didn't really see how quick A Ramp took this base. Had he done that, potentially we could have seen some Thorship Drop action over here, although of course this base did die and was dropped on the cliff at one point. Liberator siege in a very annoying location. A drop is being executed here for Savage Wood, and these are with Marauders. Now, if you really want to get the job done in late game TVZ, killing buildings, Marauders are the way to go. Multi-prong drop harass here for Savage Wood as he's dropping both of the corner bases. He picks off 2 important buildings, one of them, of course, being the Hive, and he runs away. These Gem Rainers have been stimmed. They're going to pick off the base, and Savage Wood runs away with everything but one lonesome fellow. And for A Ramp, suddenly what happens? Well, his Hive, one of the most important buildings, is dead. His Evo chamber died, and that's okay because he can only do melee, so he's going to counterattack. Unfortunately, that is a planetary fortress. Savage Wood was making money units and being patient. All those lings die. What do we see for A Ramp? An oversaturated base, a completely mined out base, an island that he could take, but then you have to ferry all the stuff, and A Ramp taps out. So let's just rewind a little bit and talk about some key features of the map. And what happened is A Ramp had some minerals there, but he kind of ran out of steam. So A Ramp did this attack with ultras. Now he's in this situation where he really has to be flooding mass ling. Because these bases have been dropped so severely and harassed so much, it makes it a little bit more tricky to hit injects and to properly make a lot of lings. Now you always want to have macro hatcheries, aka extra hatcheries just for larvae, but whenever you're being dropped heavily, that stuff kind of can go by the wayside and you forget about. Now what counters ultras? Stuff like liberators and tanks and building walls. Infestors are incredibly good with ultras, but that little burrowed infestor play, which was sniffed out by all of the previous good burrowed infestor harass, and not really so much burrowed infestor harass, but burrowed roach harass that A-Ramp did. So whenever you harass your opponent a lot with one specific type of harass like burrow, and the game marches on, a lot of times a good player will catch on and start to try to adapt to that harass. So this is what Savagewood has done by floating a starport over and making a Raven, as he's got mobile detection. And once he's killed both the infestors, these are these are 0 melee attack ultras. They're not really that scary if you have 3 carapace, or 3 armor, with Terran. So whenever you go ultras and you lose all of your mutas in the mid game, you're actually pretty vulnerable to drops. And we can see A-Ramp intelligently is trying to remake infestors here because pure ultra is not very good. But he's running out of steam here. And this is something that maps like Lost Temple and Metalopolis, which were actually considered good maps for Zerg, had in common, which is the main bases you could spawn close by air, and then you would have these huge air spaces where you saw players like Destiny would just have about 6 or 7 overlords placed throughout here to look for drops. And this means that if ever it goes to late game as Zerg versus Terran, at any point this spot, which is going to be their main, is either going to be a very important corner base or your main, can just be dropped super hard very easily. With this much airspace, there's no way you can make like enough static defense. I mean, what are you going to do, make 16 spores? It's just not feasible. And you can even get low ground push from down here. And way over on the corner, very, very hard to stop drops on this whole top side. Same deal, either going to be a very important base for you, that it's going to be hard to spot drops, or it's going to be your main. Now you can do these things in unison. One of the most important things you can do TVZ late game is drop the Zerg's main with Marauders that are 3-3 and snipe off tech. This is something that players like MMA and other Axiom Terrans like Ryung are very good at. They run around with 3 Marauder drops, and they ruin your day by doing stuff like that. And A-Ramp is in the situation where, oh, my money ballooned a little bit, I have less slings than I should, I get attacked in 2 locations at once. And very often when you take devastating damage like that, a player will just say, screw it, and they'll A-move across the map. So you have to be ready for that as Terran. And even though A-Ramp was pretty close in supply, and if he had macroed a bit cleaner, probably could have won this game at multiple times. This is a good example of taking advantage of the map and playing the map correctly can win you a game. And I just wanted to showcase a goofy, friendly game on Lost Temple. The pro games are going to be coming back once they release the BlizzCon replay, so have fun with that.